My son looked at the leg that carried him to safety twice and told me it would look wrong in the family portrait. Let that sink in for a second. Because I've had a long time to sit with it, and I still haven't found the bottom of it. My name is Walter Combs. I'm 64 years old. I've lived in Tulsa my whole life. And up until about 4 months ago, I thought I'd already survived the worst chapter my family had to offer me. I was wrong. Welcome back, family. Settle in, because this one's going to take a while, and I promise you it's worth it. Hit that like button before we start, and tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from tonight. I always read them. Let me set the scene, because that's where this whole thing cracked open. My daughter-in-law Diane had rented out the back room of a steakhouse up in Utica Square for what she called a milestone family portrait session. Professional photographer, 3 outfit changes, the whole production, real cloth napkins folded into little fans. The kind of restaurant where the iced tea comes in a mason jar because somebody decided that was elegant now. I sat at the corner of the table, my cane hooked over the back of my chair, across from my son Marcus and his wife Diane. Diane's parents, the Sutcliffes, sat at the head like they were hosting a shareholder meeting instead of a dinner. Old money out of Southern Hills, the kind of family that's belonged to the same country club since the oil boom. My daughter, Renee, sat 2 seats down, laughing too loud at something Mr. Sutcliffe said about his golf handicap. Renee's husband Craig had his arm slung over her chair, like a man auditioning for a role he hadn't earned yet. 31 years I raised that boy. 31 years, and I'm the guy at the corner of the table like a folding chair somebody forgot to put away. The waiter set down a plate of she-crab soup, and I reached for my water glass, and that's when I caught Marcus's eyes drop down, past the table, down to my right leg stretched out stiff beside my chair, because it doesn't bend at the knee anymore. Not really, not since the graft. I know what he saw. Everybody sees it eventually. Once the pant leg rides up even an inch. The skin from my ankle to halfway up my thigh doesn't look like skin. It's mottled, pulled tight in ridges, the color of a bruise that never finished healing because it never really does. Marcus's jaw did this thing, this tightening, like he was working up to something he'd practiced. "Dad," he said, quiet at first, then leaning in like he'd rehearsed the whole thing in a mirror. "I love you, but we need to talk about the portrait." The table went a little quiet. Mrs. Sutcliffe suddenly found her mason jar fascinating. "It's the sitting poses," Marcus said. "The photographer wants 3 generations, everybody in shorts and linen, barefoot on the lawn. It's the whole concept. Coastal, casual, timeless." He gestured at his own leg like he was selling me a car. "Your leg is going to be the only thing in the frame, Dad. Every photo. For the rest of our lives." Hanging over Diane's parents' mantle. A breath. Then the knife. Slow and deliberate. "Craig's going to stand next to me instead. He fits the aesthetic. You can sit at the far end. We'll pose you seated. Pants on. Nobody has to see it." Nobody said anything. Craig had the decency to look uncomfortable, studying his soup like it had personally wronged him. Renee didn't. Renee looked relieved, like something had finally been said out loud that she'd been thinking for years. I looked down at my own hand wrapped around that water glass. And I want to tell you I had some perfect line ready, some devastating comeback that put my son in his place for good. I didn't. I've replayed that moment more times than I can count, and every single time I do the same exact thing I did that day. I nodded once. I set my napkin down folded, the way my father taught me. And I stood up, and I walked out of that steakhouse without saying a single word. You gave that boy a life on this leg, and he just told a room full of strangers it's an eyesore. Tulsa traffic on the Broken Arrow Expressway doesn't care that your chest just got hollowed out with a butter knife. I sat in it for almost an hour, radio off, just me and the sound of my own breathing and my leg propped stiff against the door because that's the only way it rides comfortable anymore. I didn't cry. I want that on the record. Walter Combs does not cry in traffic on the BA Expressway, but something sat in my chest the whole drive home, heavy and useless, all the way back to my house off Yale Avenue in the Kendall-Whittier neighborhood. Small place, 2 bedrooms, the kind of house a man keeps even after he could afford better because it's paid off and it's his. I let myself in, hung my keys on the hook by the door, and stood in my kitchen not knowing what to do with my hands, which, considering the conversation I'd just walked out of, felt almost funny in a way that wasn't funny at all. I ended up in the second bedroom, the one I never turned into anything but a place to keep boxes. I sat down on the floor, back against the wall, and I pulled out an old shoebox I'd never gotten around to putting into a real album. First photo on top. Marcus, maybe 8 years old, grape popsicle staining his mouth purple, my hand on his shoulder, both of us squinting into the sun outside the fire station on 11th Street. There's my boy. There's the two of us. And that's when it came back, not slow, all at once, like a door blown open by a storm. You want to know who I was before all this? I'll tell you. I was a firefighter for the Tulsa Fire Department, Station 14, for 19 years. Good union job, brutal hours, the kind of work that puts calluses on parts of you that don't usually get calluses. Every third day, when my shift ended, Marcus would be waiting at the station with his mother, and the second I walked through those bay doors, he'd come tearing across the concrete yelling, "Dad!" Like I'd been gone a year instead of 24 hours. We had a routine. Dairy Queen on Admiral for a dipped cone, every single time, and he'd hold my hand the whole walk there, swinging our arms like the whole street belonged to just us. When we got back near the station, I'd hoist him up onto my shoulders so he could wave at the guys washing the trucks. "There's my hero," he'd yell down at me, ice cream running onto my collar, and every single one of my crew would laugh and wave back up at him. There was a guy on my crew, Ray Delgado, worked alongside me for 15 years, who used to say, "Combs, that boy's going to run this whole city someday. Mark my words." I believed every word of it. Those shift end afternoons were the best hours of my whole career. Better than the paycheck. Better than the Sooners covering the spread, which, let's be honest, wasn't a sure thing often enough to count on. I had no idea one of those afternoons was going to be the last ordinary one I'd ever have. It started like any other call. Structure fire. 2-story house over on Latimer. Working residential. Reports of a family still inside. I was first through the door on the second floor when I heard a kid screaming behind a closed door down the hall, and I didn't think. There wasn't a single thought in my head. My body just moved. I got that door open, and there she was. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, trapped in a room with the floor already glowing orange underneath the carpet where it had started to give. I got her up under one arm and turned to get back to the hallway, and that's when the floor by the door dropped out from under both of us. I don't remember the fall the way you'd think. I remember Ray's voice screaming my name from somewhere below. I remember the smell, like melting rubber and something chemical and wrong. I remember the girl in my arms, screaming, completely unhurt. Not one mark on her, because I'd turned my body on the way down, so I hit the joists and she landed on top of me. Not one drop of that fire touched her. She walked away from that day without a scratch. I didn't. Ray got to us first, pulled her out of my arms, before anybody even understood what had happened below. He never forgot it. Man still calls me every single year on the anniversary just to check in. Some things you don't stop carrying, even when you weren't the one who got hurt. I'd do it again. 100 times over, I'd do it again. That was never the question. The question, the one nobody bothered to ask me for the better part of 20 years, was what it was going to cost me after. You'd think a man who went through a burning floor for somebody else's kid would earn something. Gratitude. A little grace. At least the benefit of the doubt. My wife Sandra filed for divorce 5 months later. I remember sitting across from her in a lawyer's office downtown. My legs still wrapped, still learning how to stand for more than 10 minutes at a stretch. She wouldn't even look at it. "You knew that floor was compromised, Walter," she said, flat, like she'd rehearsed it, same as Marcus would 23 years later. "You're reckless. I can't raise our son around a man who runs toward buildings falling down. Reckless." I nearly laughed, would have laughed if it hadn't hurt so much to breathe deep. "Sandra, I went through that floor to pull a child out of." "I know what you did," she cut me off, sharp. "I know exactly what you did." And that was the thing. She did know, better than anybody. That's what made it so much worse. This wasn't ignorance. This was guilt-wearing anger, like a Halloween mask, because it's easier to be furious at somebody than to sit with the fact that you weren't the one who ran into that house. She got primary custody. I got weekends, then every other weekend, then slowly, the way a fence rusts through so gradual you don't notice until it falls over. I got less than that. And somewhere in those years, she started rewriting the story. I didn't catch it happening in real time. You never do. But looking back now, I can trace every inch of it. Little comments filtered back to me secondhand. Marcus telling a teacher his dad got hurt because he wasn't being careful. Marcus, at 12, asking me why I let that happen to myself. Not what happened to you. Why did you let that happen? 19 years, Sandra had that boy's ear every single day, and I had him every other weekend if the schedule cooperated. You do the math on whose version of the story was going to win. She turned the proof of how much I loved him into evidence against me. And I didn't even see her do it. The lawsuit against the city and the property management company that owned that building took almost 4 years to settle. The floor joists had been eaten through by termite damage the landlord had been cited for twice and never fixed. Gross negligence, the whole rotten truth of it laid out in a courtroom. I won, one big enough to change a family's whole trajectory. I never touched a dime of it. I know how that sounds. My own attorney thought I'd lost my mind. Walter, you could buy a house out in Broken Arrow with a pool. You could retire at 50. And I sat there in his office, in the same steel-toed boots I'd worn my whole career, and I said no. Because somewhere in the back of my head, Sandra's voice was still sitting there. Reckless. If I spent that money making my own life easier, wasn't that proof she'd been right about me all along? So I did the only thing that made sense to a man who'd already given his leg for somebody else's kid. I put every dollar into an irrevocable trust for Marcus, locked, protected, managed by me and me alone, set to release at his milestones. 25th birthday, first house. This portrait, if it ever came to that. I kept working, took a desk position with the department after the injury. Fire inspector, steady hours, nothing glamorous. Kept the same 2-bedroom house. Drove a used Ford pickup with 160,000 miles on it that I serviced myself because I wasn't paying a mechanic for work my own 2 hands could still do. People probably thought I was just cheap. Let them think that. The truth was, I was saving every dollar I never spent on myself for a boy who, by then, could barely stand to look at my leg. Sandra remarried when Marcus was 19. Gerald Sutcliffe's younger brother. Actually, no. Wait, let me say it plain. The man's name was Dale Whitfield, always in a golf polo, even in January. Drove a new lease every other year like it was a hobby. Called himself a private equity consultant, which in my experience is what a man says when he's never actually consulted anybody about anything. I didn't think much of him at first. Figured he was harmless. Smooth, sure, the way a timeshare salesman is smooth, but harmless. I was wrong about that too. Somewhere around Marcus's late 20s, Dale started taking a real interest in the trust. Not mine to touch, he knew that much. I'd locked it down tight. But Marcus's future access to it. Started talking to him about unlocking liquidity ahead of the milestone. About smart positioning before the distribution hits. Smart positioning from a man who'd never had 2 nickels of his own money to position anywhere. He walked Marcus through paperwork one night. I know this now. Pieced together after the fact, paperwork that used Marcus's future trust distribution as collateral on a commercial real estate deal that never quite existed the way Dale described it. Told him it was routine. Told him it was safe. Told him, probably in that same golf polo, country club voice, that he needed to sign it to protect what was already his. Marcus trusted him. He was desperate by then to prove himself worthy of the family he'd married into, the Sutcliffes. Old money out of Southern Hills, watching him the way you watch a stock you haven't decided whether to buy yet. So he signed. He had no idea what he was signing away, and I had no idea at the time what Dale was building, brick by brick, lie by lie, on the foundation of a trust I'd bled for on a burning floor. I sat there on my office floor with that popsicle photo in my hand, Marcus's purple grin, my hand on his shoulder outside the fire station, and for a second I let myself just be in it. Let myself remember what it felt like before any of this. Before the hospital, before Sandra's lawyer, before a steakhouse full of strangers watching my own son tell me my leg was an eyesore. I gave him everything I had left in me, and he looked right through it like it weighed nothing. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for the light outside to go orange, then gray, then gone. My phone rang. Number I didn't recognize. Tulsa area code. I almost didn't answer. A man who pulled a child out of a burning house for free is not going to fund a lie dressed up as a family portrait. That's what I decided. Sitting there with that phone buzzing in my hand, the room gone dark except for the glow of the screen. Remember that line? Because everything that follows comes out of it. I answered. Mr. Combs? A woman's voice, young, a little rushed. Hi, this is Brianna. I'm the studio coordinator for your family's portrait session at Woodward Park. I'm so sorry to call this late. Here we go. I'm so sorry to bother you, she said again, but we're having some trouble with the final payment. The wire transfer from your attorney's office came back blocked this afternoon, and the bank flagged the funding source entirely. Mrs. Combs said to call you directly, that you'd sort it out. Is everything all right? I sat there on that office floor, that old photograph still in my other hand, purple popsicle stain frozen forever in a Kodak moment. I looked down at my scarred legs stretched out on the carpet. Is everything all right? I almost laughed. Almost. What came out instead was low and tired, a sound I barely recognized as my own voice. No, I said. Everything is not all right. Silence on her end. I could hear a copier running somewhere behind her, the hum of fluorescent lights. Cancel the session, I said. I heard her breath catch. I'm sorry, sir. Cancel it. All of it. Mr. Combs, the contract's in your name. Her voice sped up now, the panic of somebody about to deliver bad news to the wrong man at the wrong hour. If we cancel this late, the retainer's forfeited. That's $12,000, sir, non-refundable. I know. I don't think you understand. Once we process the cancellation, there's no, I know. I said again, calmer this time, almost gentle. Cancel it anyway. And I hung up. I didn't call Marcus. I didn't call Sandra. I sat there in the dark with a 20-year-old photograph and let the silence do the talking. You want to know something? That was the first time in 19 years I felt like I had a hand on the wheel of anything. Not rage. Not revenge. Not yet. That word gets thrown around too easy, and this wasn't about revenge in that moment. It was about a man finally standing up and saying no more. $12,000 gone, just like that. And he didn't even know it yet. I didn't sleep that night. Not from fear of what I'd done. I want that clear. I slept fine with the decision. What kept me up was waiting. It didn't ring again that night. It rang the next morning at 6:50, while I was at my kitchen counter with a bowl of oatmeal. Nothing fancy. Oats and a little brown sugar. Same breakfast I've had since Marcus wore diapers. His name lit up the screen. I let it ring twice, mostly to see if my hand would shake. It didn't. Dad? His voice was tight, high, a voice that hadn't slept. Dad, what did you do? The studio called Diane. They said the session's canceled. They said it was you. Is that true? There it is. Not are you okay? Not I'm sorry about the steakhouse. Just what did you do to my portrait? It's true, I said. Why would you do that? His voice cracked, and for half a second I almost felt the old pull, the instinct that ran my whole life as his father. Fix it. Make it better. Apologize even when you're not the one who did anything wrong. I didn't apologize. You told me to sit at the far end so nobody had to see me, Marcus, I said. I'm just giving everybody a little more room down there. He went quiet. I could hear his breathing, uneven, and somewhere behind him, Diane's voice, muffled, asking what was going on. You're being cruel, Marcus finally said. Cruel. That word landed somewhere behind my ribs and just sat there, ugly and heavy. No, son, I said, and my voice came out steadier than I expected. I'm being finished. I hung up before he could answer. Here's something you should know about an irrevocable trust with discretionary distribution, folks. It's a legal vault. I built it to protect Marcus from other people, and if I'm honest, from my own instinct to hand him everything. Because it's discretionary, that means every single dollar that leaves that account runs through my signature. Dale was slick. He'd talked Marcus into signing a stack of paperwork, using his future distributions as collateral guarantee on a commercial loan. Dale was taking out for a strip mall development that existed mostly on paper. Here's the catch. No bank accepts a locked trust as collateral unless the trustee me signs off. Dale knew I'd say no, so he did what desperate men do. He forged my signature on the guarantee documents. He figured he'd use the wedding gift-sized cash flow from the portrait shoots attached Family Foundation Gala. Diane's parents had turned a simple photo session into a fundraiser dinner, if you can believe that, to cover the gap before anybody noticed. He miscalculated. Monday morning, I called my attorney, Nadia Osei, and told her to freeze every discretionary distribution tied to that account. By Wednesday, the dominoes started falling. The florist, the string quartet Diane had booked for the gala, the catering hall, all of them hit a wall. Invoices bouncing back marked insufficient funds. But I didn't stop there. I also pulled the trust backing off the bridge loan Marcus and Diane were using to cover their house payment while they waited on Dale's development deal to close. Instead of calling to ask what was happening, Sandra and Marcus went public. My neighbor, Vonda, knocked on my door Thursday evening, holding her phone out like it might go off in her hand. Sandra had gone full production, ring light, kitchen island, tears queued up on command. She tagged half the neighborhood community pages and the Sutcliffe family's business page, dabbing her eyes, saying, "My son's biological father is holding our family portrait hostage out of jealousy because his son-in-law's family has real class. He's bitter and he's controlling." She even pinned a comment at the top. "The Sutcliffes have lawyers. We will see him in court." The internet did what it always does. Hundreds of strangers calling me a monster in a comment section I never asked to be part of. But Sandra made a fatal mistake. By tagging the Sutcliffe's public page, she dragged a messy, low-class internet fight straight to the doorstep of a family that survives on privacy. She thought she was weaponizing them against me. Instead, she guaranteed they'd cut the whole mess loose. Then the trap snapped shut. When the bridge loan payment on Marcus and Diane's house bounced that Tuesday, it triggered a flag in the bank's compliance department. A human auditor actually pulled the file to see why a multi-million-dollar trust had missed a scheduled payment. They looked at Dale's commercial loan file. They looked at the guarantee signature. Then they called Nadia to verify it. She took one look at that forged document and told them the truth. Walter Combs never signed this. By Wednesday afternoon, it wasn't a family squabble anymore. It was a federal bank fraud referral. The bank froze Dale's accounts and called his entire loan due immediately. At the same time, Nadia enforced the penalty clause on the house bridge loan. Their mortgage payment more than doubled overnight, 30 days to pay or vacate. Dale Whitfield, smooth-talking private equity consultant, was staring down a federal fraud investigation and eviction from a house he never could actually afford, sitting next to a stepson whose portrait no longer had a photographer, a venue, or a family willing to be photographed with him. I won't lie to you. There was a small, ugly, human part of me that felt something close to satisfaction sitting in that. But mostly, I just felt tired. I want you to understand this stretch of time, because it's easy to make it sound like I was some mastermind in a dark room pulling strings with a grin on my face. That's not what it was. Mostly it was quiet. I went to the fire marshal's office, same as always, clocked in, did my inspections, kept my head down, came home. I stopped by Ike's Chili on Route 66 a couple nights that week, sat alone at the counter with a chili cheeseburger. Because some things a man does just to remember what normal feels like. I didn't check Facebook. Vonda did that for me. God bless that woman's need to know everything, showing up every other day with updates I never asked for but somehow needed to hear anyway. They took the second post down, she told me on a Friday. The one tagging the Sutcliffes. That's a bad sign for them, Walter. She looked at me the way people look at you when they're trying to figure out if you're all right. You holding up? Was I holding up? I thought about that steakhouse table, about Marcus's face looking at my leg like it belonged to a stranger, about 19 years of shift-end afternoons, dipped cones, a little boy on my shoulders yelling, "There's my hero," to a crew of firefighters who believed it just as much as I did. I will be, I told Vonda. And for the first time in a long while, I actually believed it. Because, somewhere across town, a house was about to lose its funding, a portrait studio had already lost its retainer. A private equity consultant was about to lose a whole lot more than a leased Lexus. And none of them saw what was coming next. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text, no name attached, Just a number I recognized as belonging to Sandra's sister, a woman named Loretta I hadn't spoken to directly in almost a decade. Walter, you need to see this. Call me. I stared at that message a long moment. Whatever this was, I thought, it wasn't going to be good news. I picked up the phone and dialed. If you've been with me a while, drop your thoughts below, hit that like button, and make sure you're subscribed. Because it only gets heavier from here. Some men beg on their knees for money. My son did it on my living room floor. And I remember every single word of it. Let me back up. That call from Loretta, that was the first domino I didn't push myself. That one just fell on its own. Walter, it's Loretta, she said when I called back, voice tight. I probably shouldn't be calling you. Sandra would kill me. But somebody's got to. Loretta, what's going on? Dale's gone. The second the auditors flagged that forged signature and froze his accounts, he knew it was over. Packed a bag that same night, didn't say a word to anybody. Sandra woke up to an empty closet and federal agents serving papers on the front lawn. He ran before they could put cuffs on him. Total coward, Walter. I called it from the start, and I hate being right. In the house? Notice of default came Thursday, 30 days before the bank starts foreclosure. I looked down at my own leg, scarred and stiff, the same leg that got called an eyesore at a steakhouse not even a month before. This leg paid for that house, in a roundabout way, through every dollar of a settlement I never spent. And the man who called it acceptable enough to stand next to in a family photo had abandoned everybody the second things got hard. Thanks for telling me, Loretta, I said. Walter. She hesitated. Are you going to help them? I didn't answer that. Not because I didn't know, because I wasn't ready to say it out loud, not even to her. I just said good night and hung up. I heard the rest through Vonda, same as everything else that month. The Sutcliffes found out about the fraud investigation the same week. Small city, remember. Everybody's one phone call from everybody else, and old money families like the Sutcliffes have a lot of phone calls at their disposal. A stepfather-in-law under federal scrutiny, a public smear campaign gone sideways, and now looking less like righteous outrage and more like a family imploding in real time, a canceled portrait session, a frozen trust that had clearly been propping up an entire lifestyle. None of that plays well at Southern Hills. Diane's parents made a call to Marcus directly. I didn't hear that conversation firsthand, but I heard enough secondhand to know how it went. They'd decided the risk to the family name wasn't worth it. Families like that don't survive scandal by standing close to it. They survive by getting far away, fast, with a clean, well-lawyered statement, wishing everybody well, and never mentioning the words fraud or lawsuit again. The marriage didn't end, not yet, but the money did, and so did the Sutcliffes' interest in being photographed anywhere near my son. Just like that? Gala gone, family portrait gone, Diane's parents' warmth gone, house about to be gone, and every single one of those things had my name quietly holding it up underneath, the whole time, until I stopped holding it up. I won't pretend I didn't feel something hearing it, but it wasn't joy, and it wasn't satisfaction either, not really. It was something quieter and heavier, like watching a house of cards fall down that I'd built the foundation for and never once got thanked for building. It was a Tuesday evening, about 3 weeks after that steakhouse, when I heard the knock on my door. I knew before I opened it. Some part of you always knows. I opened it, and there they were, Sandra and Marcus, standing on my porch, about as far from that Utica Square dining room as two people could get. Sandra's makeup was smudged, hair pulled back messy instead of styled. Marcus looked like he hadn't slept in a week, hollow around the eyes, hands shaking slightly at his sides. The hands that used to hold mine walking to Dairy Queen, now shaking on my porch rail. Dad. Sandra's voice cracked on the word. Can we come in? A month ago, she'd called me a jealous bully on the internet in front of half the neighborhood. Now she was asking permission to stand in my kitchen. I stepped back and let them in, not because I owed them anything, but because whatever I was about to say, I wanted to say it sitting down, and I wanted them looking me in the eye while I said it. They sat on my couch, second-hand, nothing fancy, the kind of couch that probably embarrassed them more than my leg ever did. I sat across from them in my one good recliner, and I waited. I've waited 19 years for this conversation. I can wait one more minute. Marcus broke first. He slid off the couch onto his knees on my living room floor. And I want to tell you that didn't do something to me, watching my own son kneel in front of me. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't. Dad, please. His voice was raw. I know you're angry. I know I hurt you. Angry doesn't begin to cover it, son, but go on. The house, we're going to lose the house. Dale's gone, Dad. He just left. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't say anything. The feds came by. They said he forged your name, that he used my future to commit bank fraud. And now everything's gone. I don't know what to do. Please, just release the trust. Please. Sandra was crying now too, quiet and controlled, the practiced kind of crying that had worked on plenty of people before me. Walter, we're begging you. We have nowhere else to go. Nowhere else to go. 23 years ago I had third-degree burns up one whole leg and nowhere else to go either. Nobody knelt on my floor for me. I didn't say any of that yet. I let the silence sit there heavy while Marcus knelt on my carpet. And then he said the thing I didn't see coming, even after everything. I remember the fire station, he said, barely above a whisper, looking up at me with eyes that for just a second looked like the 8-year-old who used to ride my shoulders to Dairy Queen. I remember the smell of that grape popsicle. I remember... He stopped. Come on, say it. Finish the sentence. His mouth opened, closed. Something moved behind his eyes, something old, something buried under 23 years of his mother's careful reconstruction. For one full second I thought he was finally going to say it. I remember what happened at that house on Latimer. I remember what you did for that little girl, and what it cost you. He didn't say it. He looked down at the carpet instead, and whatever had almost surfaced went back under. He knows. I'm somewhere in there, underneath everything his mother built. He knows exactly what this leg cost, and he still couldn't bring himself to say it out loud, even on his knees. That's the moment something in me finally, fully closed. I stood up slow, unhurried, the way you stand when you've made peace with a decision instead of reacting to one. I walked to the small table by my kitchen window, the one with 2 chairs where I eat breakfast alone most mornings, and I sat down. I looked at both of them, still on my couch and my floor, and I waited until Marcus lifted his head to look at me. Then I rolled up my pant leg, slow, and set it flat on the table where the light hit it straight on, scarred and shiny and twisted, right there where nobody could look away. You said this leg would ruin the family portrait, I said. My voice didn't shake. I want that on the record. It didn't shake at all. But this leg is the reason a 6-year-old girl grew up at all, and it's the reason you've had 31 birthdays with a father standing in the room. Marcus made a sound like the air had been knocked out of him. I carried somebody out of a fire once, son, I said. I won't carry you out of this one. Nobody moved. Sandra had gone pale, hand pressed over her mouth. Marcus just knelt there, staring at my leg on that table like he was seeing it, really seeing it, for the first time in his whole life. 31 years, dipped cones and shoulder rides, a settlement I never spent a nickel of. And it took him kneeling on the wreckage of everything I'd built for him to finally look and understand what it actually meant. Too late, son. Too late. I stood up, walked past both of them, past the couch, past 31 years of a life I gave everything to build, and went to my front window. Tulsa was doing its evening thing out there, streetlights coming on along Yale Avenue, somebody's dog barking a few houses down, ordinary life going on. Ordinary and indifferent to what had just happened in my living room. I heard Sandra behind me, voice breaking. Walter, please, we have nowhere. I didn't turn around. I reached up and closed the blinds. I heard them sit there a moment longer. The particular silence of 2 people realizing there's nothing left to say that changes anything. Then the couch creaked. Footsteps. The door opening and closing. Quiet. None of the drama of that steakhouse. None of the ring lights and accusations. Just quiet. I didn't watch them leave. I stood at that closed window a long time, my scarred leg aching the way it always does when the weather's about to turn, and I let the house go silent around me. I'll give you the rest quick, because you've earned the ending, and I don't believe in dragging out good news any more than bad. Marcus and Diane were out of that house within the month. Unbacked bridge loan, not a standard mortgage, so the bank moved fast, 30 days before the locks changed. Quiet, unglamorous, none of the internet fanfare that came with the accusations. Last I heard through Loretta, they'd moved into a two-bedroom rental over in Owasso. Modest, unremarkable, the kind of place I'd lived in most of my adult life, while they'd been living in a house with a wine cellar. Dale never resurfaced in Tulsa. Word got around eventually that the fraud investigation turned into actual federal charges, wire fraud, falsified collateral, the whole ugly list. Last anybody heard, he was somewhere outside Scottsdale, living considerably smaller than the least Lexus days, waiting on a court date he couldn't talk his way out of. The Sutcliffes never spoke to Marcus again beyond a single lawyered email wishing the family well. Clean, cold, exactly what you'd expect. As for the trust, I never released it. Not the portrait money, not the house money, none of it. Nadia restructured the whole thing eventually, locked down tighter than before, new terms that made sure nobody but Marcus himself, as a grown man making his own honest choices with nobody else's fingerprints on the paperwork, could ever touch it. No stepfather-in-law, no mother, no in-laws pressure. Just him, if he ever earns his own way back to deserving it. Maybe someday he will. That's not up to me anymore. That's up to him. As for me, I still live in that same two-bedroom off Yale Avenue. Still drive that same Ford pickup. Still do my inspections out of the same firehouse. Still stop into Ike's some nights for a chili cheeseburger, alone at the counter, same as always. Ray still calls every year. Same as always, too, right around the anniversary. Last time we talked, he said something that stuck with me. "You did good, Combs," he said. "Not the portrait thing, the other thing. 23 years ago, you did good." I know, Ray. I've always known. It just took the rest of the world a while to catch up. Some evenings, when the weather's right, I still drive down to that Dairy Queen on Admiral. I still order a dipped cone, even though I've never much cared for chocolate shell. Never did. Not really. I just liked watching him eat it. I sit in my truck in that parking lot alone now, and I look down at this leg, scarred and twisted and ugly and, in its own way, beautiful, and I think about an 8-year-old boy on my shoulders, screaming, "There's my hero," to a crew of firefighters who believed him completely. I'd still do it again. 100 times over, I'd still do it again. That was never the question. It was never going to be the question. The question was whether he'd ever be brave enough to say thank you. He wasn't. Not yet. Anyway. But this leg, it's not waiting around for it anymore. If this one hit home for you, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't, and tell me below where you're watching from tonight. I'll see you on the next one. Love isn't measured in scars or in matching some picture-perfect frame, it's measured in who showed up when the floor gave out. Sometimes the people we save the most are the slowest to say thank you, and that's not a debt owed to us, it's just how healing works on its own clock. Keep giving, anyway. The right hands will hold yours back one day, even if it's later than you hoped. A small note for you. This story was written and fictionalized by AI for entertainment purposes, while hoping to leave you with a genuine, positive life lesson.